officially started. Well, Asa, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Hope your Sunday is amazing.
Well, great to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Asa Burroughs. I'm the founder of Full Sprint Studio, which is fractional product design for startups.
We'd like to ask you a few questions about your background and your current work. And hopefully we like to convey to the audience and influence them to get inspired by stories like entrepreneurs like yourself. And my first question to you is, you mentioned helping visionary entrepreneurs build digital products quickly from idea to prototype in just 2 weeks. And can you tell us more about this process and why it is essential for entrepreneurs?
And so exactly as you described, the goal is to help people who have really good ideas actually execute on those, actually bring those into the world. And there's a couple different types of founder that I work with. Really, you can think about two. On the one hand, there's people who have a business. They have an application in the world already. They've got users and some sort of cash flow. And they're starting to realize that it is a full-time job to be managing a product, to be improving it based on feedback that you're getting from people who use it. And so I offer a service that I call the Full Sprint Design Accelerator, which is helping founders who have that application in the world come up with a structured process for consistently improving it with a lot of confidence. And so that means doing things like pretty classic product management rituals. We do kickoff calls where we're going to talk about what exactly is it we're intending to build. How can we get to more confidence about our decisions? What are the big risks involved with whatever the particular design sprint we're working on? And then we do, at the end of every sprint, we do a retrospective. And so that's a familiar enough concept, but it's a way that we can ensure that we are improving over time. We're taking a critical look at the process that we've brought to a startup and saying, giving ourselves a grade, basically. How well did we do to meet the criteria of velocity and defining requirements? So that's one category. That's application exists. The other side of it, though, is people who have a great idea and are trying to figure out what to do with it, right? It's that idea that's been kind of sitting in the back of your head that, like, when you're lying in bed trying to fall asleep, you can't get out of your mind. And that's something that I think is a really familiar feeling for people. And I've now worked with enough founders that I feel very confident in my ability to get those ideas out of people's heads. It's a mix of interviewing both them and the people they think they would be serving with the idea, really understanding what is the problem we're actually solving here and what is the thinnest or the narrowest scope of an application that we could build to get some sort of signal that this is the right thing, this is the right solution to the problem. So Full Sprint helps both of those types of founders, and the goal is really to make it as easy as possible to go from idea to something physical, something that is in your hands, that you can hold, that reflects what that idea is.
Amazing. And it seems like something that's very essential because ideas are so fragile. People will have these moments where they come up with the most beautiful and creative stuff and they jot it down in ink, and the ones who take actions are the ones who take it to the next level and convert the idea into reality. But a lot of people feel very stuck, and then the idea slowly fades away. So I think offering the solution to preserve ideas and create a process that allows people to build a prototype from an idea within 2 weeks is pretty impressive, and it's a lot of value adding to the economy. So my next question is, what inspired you to build Full Sprint, and how do you think it differentiates from the other design agencies?
Yeah. I mean, the origin story is really one of having a problem myself. I was like an enterprise designer. I worked at a giant corporate agency for many years and got a little sick of the bureaucracy, got a little sick of the pace that we were moving. And when a founder reached out to me, who was a recent graduate of Y Combinator, kind of a best-in-class startup accelerator, I got really excited about the prospect of downsizing, right? Going from this giant organization to something where I was the 6th employee. I had the ear of the VP of sales, frankly, the first VP of sales I'd ever talked to. I had a team of engineers who were excited about the prospect of actually talking to the people who would be using the products. And so that was amazing. I went and joined this startup, and the truth is the job was unbelievably hard. To be the solo designer at a startup is to be the only person on whose authority questions of anything visual is drawn on. So typography, business cards, conference booths, every single thing is kind of falling on the plate of that one person who kind of organizes the visual language of a business. And I found it to be super difficult. After about a year, the startup went under, and that's okay. That happens. Like, we have to accept that that happens. It's fine. At that point, I was super, super close to the founder, and we talked a lot about what could we have done differently? How could we have set the business up so that we weren't burning cash as quickly? One of those ideas was basically looking at my job. I was a specialized employee with a fairly expensive skill set. And the truth was, I was doing that skill set maybe 2 weeks a month in total. I was helping come up with some novel concept, executing on that idea with a feature release or some update to the application, and then shepherding it along through engineering, kind of keeping track of what's happening, but not necessarily producing anything novel myself. So Full Sprint came out of that experience. I started talking to other founders. I got their opinions on what it was like working with contracted out product design. The truth was, it wasn't that great. And so this kind of gets to your second question of what are the other agencies like? How is this differentiated? And I really see a spectrum, right? I see on the one hand, we have a traditional design agency. They are going to be delivering a giant Figma file, a giant interface design file that basically explains your whole application. Look, took us a few months. Here you go. This is everything you need. Go out and build it. And the challenge with that is, like, startups move a lot faster. Priorities change. We need to be as flexible and as agile as the customers expect us to be. And so working with a traditional agency, that was the experience that a lot of founders had. They're not moving quick enough. And frankly, they're not as invested or as intertwined with the business as we need our product designer to be, especially for a business that is hinging on the success of a product, right? If the product is the business, then contracting that out can be super scary. So that's one end of the spectrum, is the traditional agency. The other one is this new model you see cropping up that I talk about as buffet style design. It's, you can get as much design as you want for one low price every month. And that's as much design as you can fit into a chat interface, right? It's like, I'm gonna be interacting with a designer over essentially iMessage, and I'm gonna describe everything that I want from them. But that's really hard, right? That's part of the core job of a designer, is not just doing the thing, but helping you decide what is the right thing to do. So these founders were saying, if I could describe the interface in the necessary detail to get someone in a buffet style design agency to do it right, then I would just do it myself. But I can't describe it in the way that is necessary. And so they often get back end products which aren't right, which miss the mark in some way. So full sprint kind of exists in the middle there. I'm super involved with the companies that I work with. I'm meeting with them regularly. I'm talking to their customers and trying to develop that relationship of trust that allows them to feel confident putting me forward as a face of their company in the same way that they would a full-time designer.
So, talking about the, when I did research about your company, one thing that struck me is, your company emphasizes the importance of airtight documentation and design. Can you expand on its significance, especially for entrepreneurs?
Absolutely. Documentation is so important to me. So let's writing in college. I was a nonfiction English major and frankly thought that I was going to go into journalism. One of the things that I learned there is just the power of taking the time to use language to describe what you intend to do. So every single project starts with user stories. It starts with plain language descriptions of what it is we are introducing that will allow users to do something new. So a user story might be, as a user, I can invite a friend to the platform. What's beautiful about a user story is it's this common denominator of description. A lot of what I find with founders, with engineers, with people who have like an MBA or a business background, they get a little overwhelmed once we start to look at the designs, once we start to look at actually what we intend to build. And what's nice about a user story is that it's very simple to understand, no matter what your area of expertise is, and it kind of gets us on the same page. Continuing that through, we take user stories, the description of what actions we want users to be able to do, and we lay them out in our Figma files. Figma is the interface design software that matters most, basically. There are alternatives, but it really is the best. And we take user stories and we lay them out as the scaffolding for our application that we're gonna build. And so when young designers start working with me, they often find that I'm having them write a lot more than they thought they would. And it's important because we have a couple different personas that we are building for. Of course, we're thinking about who are the end users for your application. That's critical. But even before that, we're designing for engineers. What gets built in Figma is not the application. We are at best architects delivering blueprints to a set of carpenters and plumbers and people who can actually make the thing that we are trying to describe. And so I have all sorts of documents written up about handoff standards. How do we ensure that what we're bringing to an engineer is so crystal clear that it doesn't matter if they're in Brazil and English is their second language. It doesn't matter if they were involved in the design process or just getting this handed to them. We want them to be able to understand at a high level, what are we trying to do and why did we make the decisions that we did in the design process? So I think that documentation for those reasons is critical. And then the last piece is that we talk about documentation as a gift to our future selves. It's work we're doing now that is going to ensure that 3 months down the road, when we do a similar project for another client, or we do new work on the same feature set for that application, we have just an unbelievably well-documented archive of why we got to where we did.
That's pretty cool. I like how you emphasize how clear your documentation is when the design is handed off to the engineers, because in many companies, one of the reasons why they fail at creating a user-friendly product is because there's not enough communication between the designers and the engineers. And the more there's clarity in communication, I think they can build beautiful products together. So pretty cool. So how do you believe the interplay between business and technology has evolved over the years, and where do you see it heading?
I mean, you hear people say things like every business is a technology business now. And I think to an extent that is true. It doesn't matter if you're a bakery or a tax accounting firm, like you are relying, at least to some extent, on technology to support what you're doing. I think that what's become really cool in the last few years is lowering the barrier to access for customized technology. So no code and low code tools are all putting new abilities in the hands of business owners to create these really bespoke or tailored experiences for whatever their business might be. So I think that is one side of it, the low code movement. I think the other one is, of course, generative AI. And I think that there's no doubt that is going to have really, really meaningful impacts on how we work. But at the end of the day, I do think of it as another tool in our tool belt. It's another thing that we can leverage that sometimes belongs and sometimes is too much of a stretch. Sometimes is not really the thing that is going to most effectively solve the problem. So I see those two trends, or like incoming tsunamis, as being really the most important things on the horizon for the interplay between design, or between business and technology.
Definitely feel like you hit the nail on the head there, because we have so much amazing advancements in AI, and there have been so many new features in the last 6 months that have been launched with integration tools that is a complete game changer. And the new version of ChatGPT is so impressive that you can just upload a photo and it analyzes images for you. I can't even imagine what it could do next. So yeah, mind-blowing.
Kind of terrifying at times.
Yeah. Just a little bit. It seems from what you've shared with us, you're really deeply rooted in user experience. And as we're using these new technological advances like generative AI and utilizing other platforms such as CRMs that optimize some of your client engagement, what are some key factors that entrepreneurs should consider when they're using those technologies and also creating a digital product?
That's a great question. I mean, I have 6 or 8 clients that I work with on an ongoing basis. And I would say that at least 5 of them have asked me to do some sort of work that is adjacent to AI. And in most cases, what that's meaning is we have this process that we have built an application to support. And there's this one little corner of it where we think we could make our users' lives a little easier. The most recent example is a company called Minoa, which is a sales enablement tool. They help sales teams pitch the value of whatever it is they're selling to their big enterprise clients. And they do it with ROI calculators, which are really technically complicated and input heavy tools, but they also do it with just some simple text entry fields, which allow the salesperson to answer some simple questions and kind of frame the sale that they're working in. Minoa found that they were able to leverage AI to take call recordings from Gong, another very famous sales software. They could take the transcripts of those calls and put them into their application and then generate a really, really excellent high-level overview of what this particular sale is covering. And so Manoa did honestly the best thing, which is they released as quickly as possible the simplest way to solve the problem. They came up with something that frankly looked a little messy. It felt kind of clunky, but even with that release, they got a lot of good feedback. And so the founder of Manoa, Richard, came to me and he said, hey, look, I have this cool little feature in this corner of our application. What can we do to make it world-class? What can we do to like really enhance the experience? And so I have a checklist that I go through, which is anytime I'm working on an AI project, these are the 10 to 12 things I want to make sure we're doing when we're releasing it for the world. And so just a couple of them are showing users how to interact. That is a very basic idea that kind of applies to all of UX design, but really encouraging the user to take the action you want them to when it comes to AI is critical. If you need them to upload a call transcript, that should be spelled out in very clear language. And I think that one of the trends we might see is being over descriptive to start as we're teaching people how to use these tools. And then slowly, as they become second nature, you can pull away the description and just make the experience really stripped down and as basic as it needs to be. So that's one thing that's, I think, really important. Another one is distinguishing AI content visually. You often see the sparkle icon or like a wand for a wizard being used to distinguish that this particular area of the interface is calling on a generative AI software and is frankly, from the user's perspective, doing something kind of magical. So distinguishing it and helping them discover that it exists, but also giving them kind of the visual cues to file it away in their head. Right, this is that type of experience. Okay, that's helpful. The last one that I would say is just gathering user feedback. If you're gonna introduce some AI feature to your application, you wanna have, at the most basic, some sort of thumbs up, thumbs down for that experience, so that as people start to use it, you're able to look and see how often are people coming away from this really pleased. AI can be a cost-intensive, a resource-intensive application to build or feature to build. And so building in those signals from the get-go to tell you when it's time to continue investing or to pump the brakes, I think is really important.
To gather the experience from your client or your market, and then also understanding how to simplify your presentation in a way that is digestible, in a way that is understandable, and that people can share it. And it doesn't seem like they're sharing a problem. It seems like they're sharing a solution when they share it with their friends and family or community, or the larger world, right?
Totally.
What experiences? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I mean, that makes me think of something that I say often to people, which for someone who has an application they're working on day and night can be kind of hard to hear, is that really nobody wants to learn how to use your application. Something in the real world that is, I've often heard it called the compelling context, right? There's a good book called, I think it's called Badass, Making Your Users Awesome. And the thesis of it essentially is that if you're a camera company and you're making a camera that has all the best features in the world, then giving your users a manual of how to make it take pictures is probably not the best call, because they're not going to want to sit down and read front to back the manual of how to use this camera. Really what they want is a quick get started guide that's going to allow them to become a better photographer. That's the compelling context. And so no one wants to learn how to use your AI feature. They want to get their job done a little bit quicker or a little bit more effectively. It's one of the benefits, of course, of an interface like ChatGPT, where there's not really much to learn at first. You can get started so quickly by just having a conversation with the software. Like, it will explain to you how to best use it. Of course, there's a learning curve. You will get some not so great results at first, but you can just kind of press forward. And so I think it's so important for people with that idea to really be acknowledging that the application is not the skill. It's not the thing that people want. It's just the thing that facilitates that real world context.
Your perspective on how that affects product design, and you transitioned into an entrepreneurship stance, but what's your perspective on the change in terms of gathering data?
So what I'm very curious to see is we could take a still kind of mythical example of an application that uses AI to create an interface, right? Maybe it goes so far as actually coding the interface. Maybe it stops at a useful design file or wireframe of what it is you want to build. First off, at the beginning, we were talking about a challenge that founders have describing what it is they want. And when you have access to someone with design skills who you can only chat with, it doesn't necessarily lead to the best experience, right? I think that if we were to assume that that buffet style agency that has a designer on tap, as much as you can chat with them, as much as you can request, you will get. What's the difference there if it's an AI in the background making the designs? Well, theoretically, you could get them quicker. And so that would mean that it wouldn't be as frustrating if the thing that you got back didn't meet your criteria. But you still have to have a pretty good sense of what you need to make, what you need to ask of it in order to get the result that you're looking for. The other piece of it really is, with all of these tools that help us go faster, it means that speed is kind of commoditized. And really, the priority is then placed on taste and on curation. And I don't think that we are super close, at least, to a generative AI software that's going to be able to bring that piece along. The taste and curation piece, I think, is going to be the human in the loop for at least the next few years. And so all that means is, like, I might be able to get some designs out of a chat interface, but making those meet the complicated business criteria you have, making them adjust according to feedback from actual users. Try running a user testing session where it's just your user interacting and then chatting with an AI. Like, I think it would be pretty hard for them to do. You would not get the greatest insights out of that, because doing user testing is a little bit of an art in the same way that interviewing is. And like, it's not so easy to just reduce down to a chat.
Conversating a story for users to essentially adhere to and find themselves,
Definitely. I mean, I do think that there's a risk we run in business of using the word story too much to mean too big of a concept. Like, you hear so many people, you see in so many bios on LinkedIn, like, I am the storyteller at this business. I think that the value really is as a exercise in confining imagination. And so what I mean by that is we can have an idea for some feature we want to introduce. What I have started to do, and I think that this comes from Amazon, I'm pretty sure that this is how Amazon product teams work, is I try to write the press release for whatever feature or application before we have even started designing. So what does that mean? I'm sitting in a room with a founder, maybe two co-founders, we've got an engineer, we've got another designer, and everyone is talking about this cool idea we're about to pursue. Well, sitting down to write what feels like a public-facing document that says, we are X, and we are introducing Y to the world because of Z. This is the reason we are doing this. This is the thing that we are doing. And also, this is who we are. So if we can do that at the very beginning, it means that every individual contributor through that process is going to have a very good understanding of what the end goal is. They can use that document as a reference point. Hey, look, I'm about to spend 6 hours working on this bug. I'm really trying to iron this one out. Does it actually support that press release? Or is this a rabbit hole that I shouldn't be going down? How about a designer who is sitting there trying to decide between 50 different icon sets? Well, the truth is, what we're trying to do is communicate with an icon that the user can do something in this corner of the application. And so if that designer, we don't want to tell that designer, hey, look, pick this one, right? We want them to have a sense of the higher level goal that we're working on. We're trying to get to this clear end state. Does it feel like to you, in your best judgment, what you are doing and spending all that time on is supporting that goal in the best way you can? And sometimes the answer is yes, and it really matters which icon set we choose. But at the very least, we're trying to give people the goal so that they can make those decisions themselves. And I think that that's really where the storytelling piece comes in, is the feature is really just this fictional narrative we're trying to create. And we use the writing exercise to confine our imagination. Everyone has a different sense of what it is we're building. Once we put it down on paper, it's going to be a lot clearer.
Where great products are built is where great services are done. And speaking to larger projects and think of educational tools, can you share a little bit more about your Coral Syllabus project?
Wow, take me way back. This was the first one. This was really the first thing I ever did in this space. I can't believe I'm getting asked about it. Between my junior and senior year of college, I was an English major. I had a lot of friends who were studying computer science, and I also had a few classes that I was really excited about. And so the class that got this all started was called Healthcare in the United States. And it was taught by Professor Ira Wilson. And Ira did this amazing thing, which was all of our course material was current and relevant. So I guess what that means is, like, basically for homework, we read a New York Times article and a Wall Street Journal article and maybe something from the New England Journal of Medicine. It was like 3 articles that had been published in the last few years. And then we are taking what they're saying in those articles and applying the course material to it, right? How does this impact whatever it is we're learning about? Or how do we see what we're learning about reflected in these articles? And so I had this class, I loved it, and one of the things that I was kind of challenged by in the class was I went to a private college. I paid a lot of money in tuition, and the truth is nobody does, or frankly should, think about this when they're joining a school, when they're going to college, but a huge amount of your time is not going to be in a physical classroom. It's going to be using a learning management system. We used a tool called Canvas. There are others out there like Moodle and Blackboard and Top Hat. And all of them are basically taking a syllabus that a teacher has made and presenting it in like a drive, like Dropbox. Here's the syllabus. Maybe like Canvas gives the teacher the ability to break down the lessons into learning modules, right? And so I can go to learning module 1 and then I find the link there and then I click the link and I go to the New York Times and I read my homework assignment. So that's how most of classes worked. I spent a ton of time in this software and frankly, I didn't love it. And I found that most of my professors weren't making the best use of it. So without knowing anything about design at all, I started just interviewing these professors. What is your experience like of trying to use this software? What do you feel like your students are getting out of it? Is it helping them? What more could you do? What more could the application do? And so I mentioned that I had some friends in CS. They encouraged me to take this class called UX UI, which was kind of a very high level understanding of this is a discipline that exists. We're going to teach you a little bit about how to do the things, but really like it's not pre-professional school. We're just going to kind of show you these things are there and you'll learn some interesting things about the software you interact with. So I took that class first semester senior year. And then my capstone project coming out of that was building a Chrome extension that would support our learning management system. And I had no idea what I was doing at all, but I had a lot of students around me and a lot of really supportive professors who were trying to help me do it. The tool ended up being a supportive technology, really a feature and not a standalone product. But the idea was, what if a professor could go with you to the article? So instead of the learning management system functioning as a hub that is taking you from one internet site and then giving you a link to go out somewhere else where you experience that site, what if it came with you? So you have a little learning playlist in your sidebar, which shows you these are the 3 articles you're going to read. You click the first link, and because it's a Chrome extension, you can actually inject some HTML and some CSS into the page. So I could have a comment from my professor just appear right on the page that says, hey, pay particular attention to this sentence. This is really critical. This is going to show up on the midterm. After I finish reading, I could have a multiple choice question checking in. Did you catch this idea? What about a short answer? That's the kind of thing that I would have to go back to Canvas for. I would have to go into some really clunky forum that kind of looks like a 1990s library interface. And that's where I would engage with my peers. But what if that was kind of coming with me as I went around the internet? It really started to make me think about the role of academics as curators more so than writers or educators themselves. They are going out and taking the infinity of the internet and reducing it down to a set of useful resources you should engage with. I could talk a lot.
That's great.
Yeah, it's like a good example from, learning from your mistakes and making something out of it, which is what entrepreneurs, do all the time, right? And that brings me to my next question. Given all the diversity in the entrepreneurial world, how does Full Sprint cater to the unique needs of each client?
It's a good question. I mean, one of the big risks in agency work in particular is that what we're doing is too tailored or too bespoke for a particular client. In order for an agency to grow, they have to have some replication of processes, right? Some ability for them to say, we got paid to do this thing, and now we can do that same thing for someone else, but do it a little bit faster or a little bit more effectively. So when I think about catering to the needs of a diverse group of clients, there's a couple places my head goes with that. One of them is a hard truth for people building applications is that really, in order for them to be successful, about 60 to 80% of them has to be the same as all the other applications that exist. And that's just about how humans interact with technology. In order for me to do the thing you are asking me to do with your app, I need to be in a familiar enough place that I can find those things. So you need a sign-up flow that gets a certain amount of information from a user and then also starts to teach them what they're going to be able to do with this application. And frankly, it doesn't matter if that application is YouTube or a learning management system or a generative AI tool. You need to have the user make an account at some point. Once they have an account, they need the ability to sign in, to go through a forgot password flow or a two-factor authentication. Depending on the application, they need to be able to invite people or share their work. So these are all different features that I work on all the time and that I start to see crop up across different businesses. And so that's one of the ways that I've been able to do this at a degree of scale is basically when someone asks me to make a form flow, I've made a lot of them. And I've seen what are those table stakes things that need to be there in order for it to work. We need big enough buttons that people can find them. We need a label or a title for every screen so that they know where they are. It's like you can be making and selling anything, but these things have got to be true. And so what's nice about that though, and this is where we start to get to catering to the needs of diverse clients, is we can get that 60 to 80% really, really fast because we've done a lot of these things. And that means we then have more time to focus on the remaining 20 to 40%, which is the novel technology. Maybe it's a generative AI integration. Maybe it's connecting to an API or connecting two different APIs and presenting them in a new context that didn't exist before. That is the kind of thing that presents the biggest challenges for new companies. And so we want to be focusing on those as the things that need user testing and validation of the ideas. We shouldn't really be at the very start that worried about how effective is our sign-up flow, because the truth is, if we meet these basic criteria, people will figure it out. Then the question becomes, are we actually solving that unique problem? That's what we should be focusing on. So that's kind of where my head goes. I will say one thing though, which is that there's a huge issue when it comes to the types of companies that are getting invested in. They are largely the products of white male founders, and it's a big problem. And so one of my big goals here is to come up with ways that I can not just be serving that clientele. I don't want to be solving the problems of only the same people who have been kind of running the economy for a long time. I want to be coming up with ways that really, when it comes to the diversity of the products that we're building, it's going to be the result of a diverse group of founders. And so that's one thing that it kind of starts with just stating that intention, but it also has to be part of the culture of the business that you're creating. And so that is super important to me. Finding people who don't look like me, who are coming from different backgrounds, that's going to allow me to support whatever great idea they have, because I know the skills that I'm bringing will help them launch the thing. But if I'm only supporting one group of people, we're going to end up with a lot of very similar things.
Yeah, it's, a really great insight you brought that, because the more diverse perspectives you have in your company, the more likely you are to have a global brand. Whereas some companies just focus on local, and for their business model, it might work for them. But if you want, a global brand presence, I think you brought up a really good point about having, different perspectives and working with people from different backgrounds, because that just makes your business more, capable of serving multiple people in multiple geographic locations. So, cool. Can you elaborate on your statement about being a systems thinker and how this approach benefits product design?
Definitely. One of the misconceptions that people come to working with a designer with is that the design team is going to focus just on the visuals of what we're doing. They're going to be brought in at the end of the process, and they're going to take whatever it is we've done up to that point and make it look better. And the truth is that that is not accurate at all, and is not what's going to make for a great application or product in the world. Design needs to be involved a lot earlier. And so that is kind of how the systems thinking comes in. I often discourage people from treating a designer or talking about the design team as being like the people who make the product sexy. I think that it is not accurate at best and kind of harmful at worst. Really, when I look at the work that I do for clients, it's kind of blue collar. It's a little bit like what it's a little bit like what a plumber might do, pushing stuff through the pipes, right? I am coming into businesses that have, if they have an application already, then there's likely a lot of things that have already been built, a lot of decisions that have already been made, and a lot of people involved. And so my role is not just worrying about how is the visual presentation of these things, it's who needs to be involved, what information do we have about our users at this step, and if we want to get to the next step, what information do we need from them? What actions do we need them to take? This is systems thinking. This is not approaching the application design from the standpoint of like, we're gonna make all the animations and interactions really cool and slick. It's like, we just need to get someone from point A to point B. I think that that's kind of within the design realm how I think about systems thinking. But then also as a founder, there's a lot of that. And it's really what I've enjoyed the most about doing this business, is that I get to do a lot of experience design for my own agency. I'm thinking all the time about, what does it look like after a contract has been signed? How quickly can we get to some valuable deliverable that is going to make the client happy, but is also going to push the project along? That all comes down to documenting a process with standard operating procedures. It comes down to training the employees in a way that doesn't just tell them this is what we do or this is how you should do it, but kind of inspires them to take control of the process themselves, to find joy in the work that they're doing. I think that all of that is systems thinking. really, if I could describe my job in a single interaction, it's zooming out, right? My ability to just be in the weeds, but also be operating at a high enough level that I can kind of see the forest for the trees. I think that that is just the absolutely critical skill that's going to help me win at doing this. If I could just zoom out far enough and see enough of the steps in the process, then I know I'm not going to miss something. I know that I'm going to be making people happy all the way through.
The fact that you brought up, getting a bird's eye view of the picture and seeing it from a macro approach instead of a micro approach, because one of the pain points that many entrepreneurs experience is they're so invested into the micro details of their business that they forget the bigger picture. And, reminding yourself that sometimes you have to look outside your company so that you could focus on your strengths, whereas the things that are not as important, you can outsource those things. So
I have like a visual that I've been starting to sketch out in a notebook, which is essentially I've written down all of the steps for my business, everything from payroll to taxes to delivering design services. And a lot of them right now have just a kind of simple arrow associated with them. I am starting here, and me, the founder, I am the one taking it to that next step. And so the first thing that I need to do is write out the sequence of steps that allow me to complete that arrow type process, a very linear business activity. The goal is to get these to be self-contained loops of action. So for instance, with payroll, I've been working with a friend of mine named Ashley to run payroll for me. And essentially what that means is I started out by having this task that took me 20 to 30 minutes, a bunch of back and forth messages every 2 weeks. And I wrote out all the things I'd do. And then I worked with Ashley to come up with ways that she could step in and take those responsibilities away from me. And so payroll used to be that linear arrow. And now payroll is a closed loop where I have a couple places that I pop my head in, and I know before we actually send anything out, I want to get the chance to review it. But that process is working over time without me being involved. If I could come up with a way to do that for all of the existing processes in the business, then it would mean that I had free time to come up with the new ones. What are those next linear processes that I want to be pursuing that are going to allow me to grow or scale or deliver more value to the people I'm working with?
Thank you for sharing that. Your experience at Electro Creative Workshop seems to have a strong emphasis on web experimentation and digital product construction. How has this shaped your perspective on digital product development?
So Electro Creative Workshop is the internal creative agency for the Clorox company. Clorox owns Brita and Burt's Bees and 40-something consumer goods brands. When I graduated college, I had been working on this side project for just long enough that I had learned the tools of the trade. I got very, very lucky in that a friend of mine had just gotten the job as the head of user experience design at Electro. And he hired me as a junior designer to basically help him do his job. I was going to just be his understudy that was kind of taking his ideas and running with them. The first project that I worked on was for Brita, and it was a product finder. So essentially, we took 25,000 search inputs from the Brita website, literally 25,000 individual queries where someone somewhere was entering into the search bar anything, whatever they could think of. And we categorized all of those. Talk about something that ChatGPT would crush in a matter of minutes. We categorized all of them and figured out what are the most popular searches. So search is something that people often do when they first come to a website if they don't see what they're looking for immediately in the navigation. So this was my first professional design project, was taking all of those searches from Brita and coming up with a better feature for helping users find the product that they were looking for. And it was really my jumping off point. The project maybe took a month. The development of it took about a month and a half after that. And by June, the year after I had graduated, we had a new feature in the world that over the coming months had millions, actually millions of people interact with it. And so from my perspective as like a young designer, I was not super bought into the content of the work. I didn't care that much how effectively people were finding their Brita filters. But what was so amazing to me was that I had made these little decisions on my desk, decided that the navigation was going to look like this, and the user was going to have the ability to trigger a little comparison chart here. And then over the coming months, thousands and thousands and millions of people did those things. And it was just unreal to see that work go out in the world. So that was kind of the start of it. And I think that the biggest thing that I learned in my time at Electro was the block-based nature of all of this work. So blocks are modules or little elements on the page that you see across every website. If you open up Reddit right now, if you open up X things, right? Search bars and input fields and buttons. My job at Electro was to service 40 different companies that all had kind of similar but often pretty unique needs in a way that was like really efficient. How could I deliver for Burt's Bees a product finder after doing the Brita version? What did I learn from that first one that would allow me to more quickly solve a similar problem for Burt's Bees? So that was Electro. I was there for 3 or 4 years and still do some contract work for them, honestly, because I really like the people. That was, I don't have to go into that much detail about it, but I was 21 years old when I started. I was 15 years younger than the next youngest person. And they were so supportive of me. These were people who had like been in creative agencies their whole career and then decided to go in-house somewhere. And it was unbelievable how nice they were, how much they cared about my development.
Wow, that's very impressive. I feel like just based on what you said and the answers you've been giving us, your strength lies in identifying patterns and identifying similarities and trends, and honing in on that and enhancing your next project by identifying those similarities. So that's something that is very profound and definitely will inspire a lot of the people in our audience who is watching this. And that brings me to my next question. How has your experience in different roles from UX design to content consultation contributed to your multi-dimensional views on building digital products?
Okay. I think that content consultation there is maybe coming from some work that I did in the past for nonprofits, which was a friend of mine is the CEO of a child psychology nonprofit in Oakland, California, and they work with children in the foster care system and kids who have had, frankly, really traumatic experiences in their life. They have a lot of stories to tell, and part of the role of that nonprofit that I was working for was they can't be telling specifically the stories of these kids who have had these experiences. It's both illegal and unethical, but they still have to somehow communicate what it is they do to the rest of the world. One of my big goals in the work that I'm doing now is to build a business that will allow me to support the industries that aren't as well resourced as my current clientele. So nonprofits is one. The public sector is another, right? We hear about, I think that in Iowa, there was a Democratic convention where they released an application that was supposed to be supporting voting, and it failed so bad. People could not use the application, and it ended up having really significant real world impacts on an election. And so when I think about the people that I support now, I think that they are definitely the innovation drivers of the economy, but there's also something to be said for the fact that it's easier to build a business supporting them. They have seed money. They have a clear customer base and a path to revenue. I want to be able to do this work for the nonprofit that does education in prisons. I want to be able to do this work for a county in Iowa that wants to increase civic engagement. The truth is that it doesn't really matter what context you're interacting with the technology. I can be selling Burt's Bees and I can be putting out a new SaaS product in the world. It's all humans interacting with an application at the end of the day. And if I can build a business that is supported enough and solid enough that I can take risks with clients who can't pay as much or with clients who can't pay at all, that's kind of where I want to see this go. I want to be building in processes that allow me to say, okay, some percentage of my time is going to be going directly towards making the world a better place in some way. And if that means going back to this child psychology nonprofit and saying, hey, look, I can help you make a better website, or I can help you create an application that allows your children that you serve to maintain communication with their therapists or their the people who support them in their lives. That's really what I want to be doing. And I think that it's just, again, about just setting the intention now and understanding that it might not happen immediately, but if it stays in my mind, I do feel that it will happen in the future. I think that an experience I had when I was living in New York City is kind of a good illustration of how a group of people, whether it's for a nonprofit or community organizing, can kind of leverage the tools that are available today and becoming increasingly available in the future. I was working with, it's called the Sunrise Movement. It's like a youth climate organizing group where, we would have a meeting every Sunday night, and there was a kid named Saul who was literally 15 years old, and I found out months later that that's how old this kid was. Saul uses they, them pronouns and had the most encyclopedic knowledge of the political world that was just so amazing to see. And so I was going to these meetings for Sunrise Movement, trying to help them at the very start of COVID take what had been a really in-person experience and continue to make the real world impact on elections. They were endorsing candidates and getting them elected to New York City offices. How could they continue to do the work that they were doing when everything went indoors, everything went remote? And so I like this example because, first off, every time I met with them, I felt immense pride to be surrounded by a bunch of like high schoolers and college age kids who were so driven as to be spending their Sunday nights doing this kind of organizing work. The other thing that I saw was that they were pretty freaking scrappy. They managed to put together a Slack channel with 700 people on it in a matter of weeks after the start of COVID. I got called in because they were trying to build a simple Squarespace website. And I knew that even though I was used to working with custom code, a lot of the processes that I understood of like gathering information, gathering content that's going to be put out on a website, it all applied regardless of if you were using kind of the like most sophisticated website builder or Squarespace, which is very user-friendly and great for that reason. And so I was able to come in and help them set up a website. I was able to help them set up a content calendar using Airtable, where they were doing something that a lot of startups still struggle with. They had 25 volunteers who each had a day of, and are also things that will allow you to communicate more effectively and frankly to get more things done. Is it ever too early?
Are there stages when you should jump into it? I just wanted some insight from you in terms of where your background is from.
I mean, I think that it depends on the type of investment. So I have, in the last month and a half, I've had a lot of people get in touch with me who want to make an app of some kind. And they basically have a good idea and maybe have a little bit of their own money that they're looking to put towards it. And so I've been trying to come up with a kind of good faith offer I could present to them that would be whether it's some small amount of money at the start and then a promise of more money in the future when the thing takes off, or some sort of revenue share or profit share for whatever it is we're building. So I think the truth is it's never too late, or it's never too early to start having the conversations. People will really offer opinions for free very quickly. And so if you can come up with a good set of questions and put together a list of people you think would be interesting, that's maybe the first place I would start. You don't have to commit to anything. You don't have to commit to buying some expensive service. You really want to understand, like, what is it that I'm able to do as the prospective founder, and where could I spend some money to extend my abilities to make this whole thing happen a little bit faster.
Either starting or continuing the journey.
Well, there's definitely two books that I end up recommending all the time. One of them is called Continuous Discovery Habits by Teresa Torres, and it's an unbelievable, detailed explanation of how to do what's called product discovery. So we've got an idea, we've got a potential user base. How do we determine what it is we need to actually build in order to support that user base? I reference this book all the time. I use a lot of the exercises from it. I really couldn't encourage people enough to read it. Another one that's actually free is a PDF ebook by the product team at Basecamp. Basecamp is a project management software, and they have been around for a long time now and have a really super dedicated core group of users. in the last few years, they released a book called, it's basically a detailed explanation of how they get work done. And what they do is they introduce some little tweaks to classic product management and product design processes that are really geared towards startups and small teams where the goal is to deliver value consistently. The goal is not just to build everything on the backlog. Like, that doesn't make sense to do because you need to be adapting your goals all the time. So Shape Up was the book that I read where I found myself most immediately being able to take action on the ideas. I often think of like a sort of fictional like leverage ratio or quotient when I'm reading something. I kind of wish I didn't think about it because it would mean that I would read more and be happier probably as a result. But anytime I'm reading a book, I'm thinking about, of the time that I'm spending here, how actionable are the things that I'm learning? It's harder if I'm reading a novel. I don't encourage people to do that if they're reading fiction. But when it comes to like a business book, I really want to have as close to a one-to-one relationship with what I'm learning, right? Oh, they talk about this, they give me an example that helps me put some detail to the concept, and now I'm able to take that concept and apply it immediately to my work. Another book that I read where it had a very, very high leverage quotient was Profit First, which is about small business accounting. I immediately just took the advice and did what this author was suggesting, and it set me up for the success I've had over the last year. So those are some books that I would definitely read. I think that if I could give you one single piece of advice to hold on to as you're making something, it's that if you're not embarrassed by your first draft, you're probably not moving quick enough. And what that means, it's not my line. I think that might be Paul Graham from Y Combinator. But essentially what it means is not you have to be moving as fast as humanly possible all the time, but you should have a tendency or a bias towards shipping what you're doing. Because the truth is, we all interact with a lot of bad technology every day, and we're just fine with it. We just do it. It's okay, right? Like my credit card comes from a business that is like so well resourced, and the application sucks. Like, I hate it, but I still do it, and I like pay for the card. Like, that's something I'm used to. And so when a company of that size is able to get away with shipping stuff that is incomplete or imperfect, then you should really let yourself off easy, right? Like, you have an idea you want to make, get to the quick.
Let yourself, taste the ground a little bit. You'll get up for sure. And I think that's definitely like an ode to the whole entrepreneurship journey. Is it's not going to be easy. There's going to be times where you experience the downturns and the upsides of a business, and you're at the helm, right? You're grabbing the bull by the horns in that sense, and it's something that
Yeah, that was very profound, especially like when you mentioned like keeping the spark of the idea alive by acting upon it quickly. I think that's so important because people don't give it enough time. Like they think of something really good, but then they just give up too quickly because they want to delay the idea solving stage for a different time. But if you're just able to do it right away and hone in on it and just be consistent about it every day, I think your actions can speak louder than your words, and you can make some beautiful products and create some amazing services. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of this, Asa. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to share before we wrap this up for you?
I mean, I think that if people are interested in learning more or want to reach out, you can definitely find some evidence of the work I'm doing at www.fullsprint.studio. You can also find me on LinkedIn. My name is Asa Burroughs. There's definitely only one of them on LinkedIn. That's AsaBurroughs. And the truth is, I love having conversations with people who have harebrained, crazy ideas. I'm pretty good at helping them distill it down into a set of actionable steps. And whether or not I think they're a good prospective client for Full Sprint doesn't matter. I want to have more conversations with people who are dreaming big. And so if you fit that criteria, then don't hesitate to reach out. Shoot me a DM. I promise I'll respond.
Well, thank you again. And we'll definitely drop the links towards the end of the podcast. Again, Asa, thank you for joining the Nomadic Innovators podcast series. We look forward to showing this to our audience.
Hell yeah. Great to see y'all.
Awesome.